Mighty warriors have used this technique passed down through the ages. Humanity's first weapon, that's right, the fist. With the release of the new Pugilist, players can't help but ask, should I play Monk or Pugilist, and which one punches better? Today, we'll answer that by looking at how each class feels as levels climb to determine which class is the master brawler and which one might be the punchline. Martials have been in a weird spot for a while, but the 2024 rules are at least trying to push them in a better direction. More stuff to do, like weapon masteries, which is its own video. What's got me excited with this new martial class is that it uses strength. Is this a martial renaissance? Well, not exactly, but I still enjoy the niche the Pugilist fills. We're exploring this topic today by looking at each class in their early, mid, and late game, side by side, instead of doing one after the other. I won't be looking at subclasses, as that would make this video hours long, just the base classes, and I gotta get content somewhere. Let's start where it counts. What is the Pugilist, and why does it feel so different at the table versus the Monk? They both use the same spell, Punch, so aren't they the same? Well, apparently not, my wizarding companions. The Pugilist class. The Pugilist is a strength-based unarmed brawler, a fighter who learned combat in back alley taverns and underground rings. Mechanically, you've got a D10 hit die, which puts you in that respectable bulk tier. Not quite barbarian beef, but you're not fragile either. You also get light armor training, and your defensive identity is Iron Chin. While in light or no armor and not using a shield, your AC is 12 plus your Constitution modifier. You don't need to avoid hits or dance around them like some fancy pants monk. You take hits and you keep walking forward like a badass in an action movie. This class runs on two primary engines, Fisticuffs and Moxie. Fisticuffs makes your hands and your Pugilist weapons real weapons. You get a bonus action unarmed strike, your damage uses a scaling Fisticuffs die, and your improvised weapons all have the SAT mastery. Then you've got Moxie, which just represents your grit and swagger. You recharge it on short or long rest and spend it for temporary HP, punch bursts, and hit and run mobility. So the Pugilist fantasy is simple. Instead of the calm master of the self, you're the stubborn, tough and rumble warrior with grit and calloused fists. Now, what do the early levels of Pugilist look like? Round 1. Early game. Level 1, bonus action punching is there from the start. Your damage is pretty strong early, 1d8 is the same as a longsword, and bludgeoning is rarely resisted. Iron Chin makes you naturally tougher as you build Constitution, similar to a barbarian, making your AC 12 plus Constitution. This means you're probably starting the game with around 15 AC, also similar to a barbarian. At level 2, Moxie arrives, and suddenly now you have choices. Moxie acts kind of like focus points, and they basically do the same thing. You can expend Moxie for any of the following: Brace Up for temporary HP, 1-2 Punch, which allows you to punch twice as a bonus action, or Stick and Move for mobility, allowing you to disengage or dash. Then the Pugilist identity kind of starts to lock in with Bloodied but Unbowed, which refills your Moxie whenever you take damage, and gets even nastier when you're bloodied, giving you temporary HP 4 times your Pugilist level that lasts until short rest. This is pretty strong for level 2. The game is basically telling you to stand your ground and get back in the ring. At level 3, Heavy Hitter makes you a frontline bully. You can deal damage and apply grapple or shove on the same hit. This allows the Pugilist to have control and damage within the same turn. At this stage, I'd say the Pugilist has quite a control advantage over the Monk. Being able to push a goblin over a ledge or grapple him and punch him at the same time is great. At level 4, you get your Feat or ASI, but the big standout is Dig Deep. A 10-minute long window of resistance to all normal damage types, bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing. It's kind of like a barbarian's rage, but can be used once per rest, and it doesn't need a bonus action to extend. It also lets you ignore exhaustion up to level 6. It's the movie moment where you're exhausted, bleeding, and furious, but somehow harder to kill, kind of like Wolverine. At level 5, you get an extra attack, better Fisticuffs die in the form of a 1d10, and Haymaker, which is kind of like your highlight reel button. It maxes out your damage upon hit and refunds the Moxie points you spend if you connect. Not sure how that works, but I guess congrats, you pat yourself on the back. Early game takeaway is, Pugilist is a durable, punchy, and surprisingly controlling class for bare hands. I'd say this is the area where the Pugilist shines the most, giving goblins everywhere shiners with its high damage per round. Now let's take a look at our Kung Fu companion. The legendary master of skill hardly needs an introduction. The Monk, the disciplined martial artist who turns training into something that looks suspiciously like magic, moving faster than reason, striking with precision, and refusing to be pinned down. Where the Pugilist wins in grit and swagger, the Monk wins with control and composure, every step measured and every mistake punished. At level 1, your martial arts baseline die is stronger than it used to be in 2014, now starting at a D6, and you immediately feel more like a specialist. You have multiple attacks, smooth action economy, and your body as a weapon fantasy right out of the gate. As before, you can use dexterity instead of strength for unarmed strikes. Your AC is also 10 plus your dexterity and wisdom modifiers, which makes the monk a lot tankier than you would think if you build optimally, especially scaling into later levels. At level 2, congrats, you get increased movement speed by 10 for free. This keeps going up as you level up for free. Focus points replace ki, but it's basically the same mechanic. And the big one is flexibility. Your mobility tools are a lot cleaner and much less punishing to use. You also get uncanny metabolism. It allows you to restore your focus points between initiative once per long rest and heal a rolled martial arts die plus your monk level, which helps you start important fights with resources instead of having to hoard them. This is okay at level 2 and helps you avoid having to take any rests, but might not be useful depending on your party. Now this might look familiar, but I promise Monk actually came up with it first. Flurry of Blows. You can expend 1 focus point to make 2 unarmed strikes as a bonus action. This is the Monk's version of 1-2 punch and is pretty much the same thing. With Patient Defense, you can take the Disengage action as a bonus action. Alternatively, you can expend 1 focus point to take both Disengage and Dodge actions as a bonus action. And then there's Step of the Wind. You can take the Dash action as a bonus action. Alternatively, you can spend 1 focus point to take both Dash and Disengage as a bonus action. And your jump distance is doubled for the turn. At level 3, you get Deflect. If you would receive bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage, you can then use a reaction to reduce the damage by 1d10. Then, if it's reduced to 0, you can spend a focus point to redirect the damage, and that creature must succeed on a dexterity saving throw or take damage equal to 2 rolls of your martial arts die plus your dexterity modifier. Being able to just flat out ignore damage with the potential of dealing more to an opponent is a class-defining fantasy trait. It's a lot of fun describing how this happens with roleplay. What's more, at level 4, the monk can now choose an ASI or a feat. We also get some utility in slow fall, which allows us to reduce the damage we would take by the fall by 5 times our monk level. For example, if I fall at this level, I can reduce up to 20 damage. I'm not sure how this works mechanically, but I like to think they wave their legs so fast in the air they fall more slowly like Yoshi. At level 5, we get an extra attack and the reworked Stunning Strike, which allows the monk to spend 1 focus point when hitting a creature with a melee weapon or unarmed strike. The target must then succeed on a Constitution saving throw or be stunned until the end of the monk's next turn. This becomes a reliable control tool. While not quite as strong as the Pugilist control at this point, let's not ignore how powerful a stun can be. Stunned creatures can't act or react, so they're basically just punching bags for you. The early game takeaway is, Monk isn't built to soak damage like the Pugilist, and doesn't deal quite as much damage at earlier levels, but it's harder to pin down, and its control tools start to really come online by level 5. A bit later than the Pugilist, but has a higher variety of mobility tools with Patient Defense, increased movement speed, and Step of the Wind. I have to admit, after looking at all of this, I think the early game round goes to our newbie the Pugilist. Having more damage earlier is highly valuable, and being able to focus your stats into Constitution and Strength makes you a meat shield that's really good at early levels. But what's more important at this point, the Pugilist starts fulfilling its power fantasy more than I would say the Monk does. Without further ado, let's take a look at our round 2, our mid-game. At round 2, the Pugilist comes out swinging, but will they hit? This is where the Pugilist either becomes the party's unignorable problem, or learns that confidence is not a damage type. At level 6, Moxie-fueled Fists comes online. You gain the ability to switch your unarmed or improvised damage to Force. This is one of the most important stay relevant upgrades to the whole kit, because mid-game is when resistances start showing up more regularly. At level 7, you get down but not out. Your bloodied mechanics get sharper. When you trigger your big refill while bloodied, you can enter a short window when you hit harder based on your Constitution modifier, and how hard you're pushing yourself. This is very Pugilist. The closer you are to losing, the more dangerous you get. This helps accelerate combat too, and so it's nice for DMs. At level 8, there's not much to see here, but it's still nice that you get an ASI or a feat. At level 9, you get School of Hard Knocks. This is your mid-game identity spike. Once per turn, you add a big chunk of damage from a hit in the form of a d12, or you force enemies to deal with you with Provoke. They have disadvantage on allies until the end of your next turn if they don't attack you. You can also opt to use Endanger, maxing the attack damage of the next hit. This could be useful if you wanted to max out another marshal's damage. These traits are nice to have, but honestly don't feel as strong in practice. The d12 is nice though. In actual play, this does contribute to the Pugilist becoming a tempo controller. You're either adding damage, setting a max damage follow-up for an ally, or pulling heat off of the squishies. At level 10, you get Herculean and Shake It Off. Herculean is purely utility. Your strength score is considered doubled when determining how much weight you can carry, kind of making you the party's pack mule. To be honest, Pillar Breaker is kind of underwhelming. Whenever you hit an object with an unarmed strike, it's critical. This is mostly just a flavor ability, and I can't think of many instances where this would actually be useful. I'm sure there are some fun dungeon relevant uses. If you've used this before with success, please let me know in the comments. You also get a double jump distance, but Is that really relevant when a lot of classes or species have access to flight at this point, and the monk can just use Step of the Wind to do the same thing? Shake It Off is your mid-game insurance policy. You can shake off most conditions once per long rest, or increase your exhaustion by 1 to restore it. This is nice, but when we compare it to the monk's level 10 abilities, it doesn't really stack up. The mid-game takeaway is that you're still a mortal grit and tough and rumble, but frankly the class does lose some of its momentum here when it comes to power and fantasy. Alright, let's swap over to the monk. At level 6 you get Empowered Strike. Monks gain the same force switch, which keeps your damage relevant as resistances show up. The difference is Monk's whole kit is built to capitalize on staying mobile and hard to lock down, making it easier for the monk to optimize this damage option against squishier foes. At level 7, the monk gets Evasion. This is one of the biggest durability spikes in the game. A ton of mid-game threats are dexterity saves, breath weapons, fireballs, trap nonsense, and evasion turns them into a meh, I've seen worse. This is why the monk feels tougher than their hit die suggests. At level 8, you get an ASI or a feat, and at level 9, you get acrobatic movement. This is where positioning becomes crazy. Wall running and water running isn't just cool, it changes how fights play. Suddenly, the backline isn't safe, choke points are less relevant, and the battlefield becomes a monk's parkour playground. You're basically a ninja from Naruto. At level 10, you get heightened focus and self-restoration. This is a major winning option for the monk. Your focus spenders become stronger versions of themselves, you get more output, better defense, more utility, and self-restoration helps you shrug off common disabling conditions without you losing your whole turn. This is the exact kind of scaling that martials need, numbers and agency. The upgrades are Flurry of Blows becomes 3 unarmed strikes. Patient Defense gives you temp HP equal to 2 martial arts die rolls. Notice the touch of tankiness? And Step of the Wind lets you move allies without provoking opportunity attacks. You're like an emergency escape button. Mid-game monk takeaway is that even before late game, the monk starts feeling mythic. Better defenses against big effects, better movement, running up walls, and better turn insurance. That being said, I think it's pretty clear that while both classes have many similarities at that point, the monk is just better. Both classes are meant to do different things, but at level 10 the monk got everything the pugilist does but beef. It starts to fulfill the kung fu legend the class was meant to, while the pugilist seems like it already hit its mark, then gave up halfway through mid-game. Round 2 goes to the monk. Now we hit our third and final round, the late game. The late game pugilist isn't bad per se, I'd put it a little below middle of the road. At level 11, your fisticuffs die improves again to 1d12. Your baseline hits now feel like they belong with the big boys as you're matching the baseline damage of your axe-wielding barbarian friends. At level 12, you get another ASI or feat. This is where you finish capping off strength or constitution, or lean harder into control feats. Late game pugilists love anything that helps stay it in the pocket or keep it near its enemies, for example with Sentinel. At level 13, you get Dig Deeper. This is where you get your level 99 boss mode. You get the full benefits of Dig Deep for a shorter, more intense window, and your Hard Knocks pressure ramps up, allowing you to use its effects twice on a turn and apply it more often. In practice, this is your important fight resource button, what you turn on versus the big bad evil guy. It works, your damage goes up, and once again, you're tougher to kill. At level 14, you get Unbreakable. Advantage on strength, dexterity, and constitution saves. Plus, reroll tech by spending 1 moxie point on a saving throw is great to have, but couldn't you take lucky at level 1? Late game fights often hinge on did you fail the save or lose your turn. So any feature that denies that is nice to have. My point is there's a lot of ways to get this. At level 15 you get Pugnacious. Initiative becomes a real reset moment. You clear exhaustion and refresh your uses of Down But Not Out, Dig Deep, and Shake It Off per long rest. So you can show to the big fight ready. This is how Pugilist tries to keep up late game. The problem is, while this does make the class feel really consistent, for a level 15 feature doesn't make them feel like they shine. Maybe it's the Pugilist that will take a shiner here. Level 16, you get another ASI or feat. At level 17, your damage die increases to a 2d6, meaning you have a slightly better mathematical chance of rolling higher damage. Your subclass gets another feature, and your baseline becomes smoother and more consistent. This is a high-level brawler feel. Fewer low rolls and more reliable output. At level 18, you get Fighting Spirit. This is your I refuse to die button. You would drop to 0, but you don't. You pop back up, refill resources, and become absurdly hard to kill for a short window. When you drop to 1, you gain temporary hit points equal to half of your maximum hit points, regain all your expended moxie points, and have resistance to all damage except force for the next minute. This is the moment the Pugilist earns the title Unbreakable, even though it's still a very grounded class. Level 19, you get your epic boon and feat. The book recommends the boon of combat prowess, and I don't disagree, being able to hit consistently is good. At level 20, you reach peak physical condition. Your stats push past their normal limits, exhaustion gets cleaned up, and your short rest sustain becomes great. At capstone, Pugilist becomes more of an endurance bruiser, harder to kill, harder to wear down, and always ready for one more round. The word consistency comes up again. you probably won't run out of resources anytime soon. Can you use those resources in a more creative or powerful way like some other classes? Late game Pugilist takeaway is that it scales through grit, saves, and refusal to die, and the recovery loops do keep you relevant, but not necessarily powerful. And this is where the contrast between Monk sharpens. Late game is where the Monk starts feeling kind of like a Dragon Ball Z side character. The kit gets cleaner, the defenses get absurd, and you start stacking win conditions in the exact places high-level D&D tries to delete you from the fight. At level 11, your martial arts die improves to 1d10, and your subclass continues to scale, meaning your baseline punching stays relevant while your abilities turn you into a shonen protagonist. At level 12, you get another feat or ASI, but what really matters is at level 13, you get Deflect Energy. This is an important defensive scaling point. You can always use a reaction to deflect damage regardless of the damage type. Enemy fireballs you and you fail the dex save? No problem. Well, mostly. You might still end up a toasty monk. At level 14, you get Disciplined Survivor. This is one of the biggest martial power spikes in the game. Save coverage on all throws and reroll potential by spending focus points. Late game isn't just about taking damage, it's about avoiding turn loss so that you can maintain your DPR. Monks become one of the hardest martials to shut down, especially for spellcasters. At level 15, you get Perfect Focus. Resource reliability goes up, and you start fights ready more often, making sure you don't have less than 4 focus points for combat, and you're less likely to hit that awkward I'm out of monk juice moment that you were before. At level 16, you get ASI or feat, and this allows you to final tune, likely maxing out your dexterity and wisdom. At level 17, martial arts die improves again to a 1d12 and subclass scaling continues. Your baseline output stays competitive while your kit remains flexible. At level 18, you get superior defense. Monk gets the fine, I'll do it myself tank mode resistance on everything for a full minute, and it's kind of defensive button that lets you stand in the worst place possible on purpose. At level 19, you get an epic boon or feat. I would say the monk has a lot more options here. At level 20, you get Body and Mind. Your stats push into legendary territory, up to 25 in Wisdom and Dexterity, and you get 4 stat points in each for free. Wow, this isn't just the more damage, it's the full package. ACs, DCs, saves, initiative, accuracy. You don't just punch like Sun Wukong, you move like him, and you keep your turn when the game tries to take it away. Round 3 has to go to the monk. In conclusion, the Pugilist just doesn't scale as cleanly as the base 2024 monk, not because the Pugilist is awful, it's not. It's because the monk stacks upgrades in places mid to high level D&D cares about. Saving throws, damage avoidance. The Pugilist scales in consistency and damage, but the base kit kind of falls flat at higher levels. Maybe if the base Pugilist fantasy evolved into a Hercules type character as levels went on, it would give the class more of a late game identity. But if we zoom out even further, there's a bigger truth. Martials just don't scale like casters, and the 2024 rules are a step in the right direction with more agency. You still won't make it as far as casters do. While martials often scale by getting more of a I do what I already do, the monk kind of lets you have new abilities. And yes, martials do feel better now, but by mid-game you can feel the gap in influence. And the problem isn't deal damage, it's solve the encounter a la banishment. Although on the flip side, the reality check is that most games are played between levels 1 and 11, and that's where campaigns start and many end, and where the class feel matters. In that range, the Pugilist is genuinely awesome and fun to play. Tough, punchy, satisfying, and it fills a niche that didn't really exist. But if we're talking full fantasy progressions, when I play a fantasy game, I want the fantasy to become more supernatural over time. I want that progression to feel like legend building, more defying physics mixed with jaw-dropping drama. It's fun to imagine our heroes being fantasy stars. Do you agree or disagree with my assessment? Do you think Pugilist punches above its weight? Let me know in the comments. Also, big thanks for checking this video out. I'm thinking of doing a special short form video once I reach 100 subscribers. I'll give you a hint. It might have something to do with my grimoire, and you might be able to figure out if you snoop on my other socials. Take care.